The movie begins by showing a battered man coming to the police station. The man is named Ha-Ho Mo, a kung fu martial arts practitioner. The police asked what happened to Ha-Ho Mo so that his face was battered and covered in blood. Ha-Ho Mo then replied that he accidentally killed a boxing master, so the reason he came to the police station was to surrender himself. The scene switches 3 years later and shows a crowd of police officers on the road where an accident occurred. Not long after, a woman named Luke Yun-sum, who turns out to be one of the police inspectors, arrives. Inspector Luke was then invited inside to see the condition of the victim and the scene of the accident. After being identified, Inspector Luke discovered that the victim was a former martial arts expert who had died because someone deliberately killed him with bare hands. The killer also left a trail in the form of an object that looks like a swallow sculpture made of iron. The scene then moves to the prison where Ha-Ho Mo is. Ha-Ho Mo is seen massaging one of his colleagues in prison, but soon a group of other prisoners come and chase them away. Ha-Ho Mo, who didn't like the commotion, chose to give in and move his seat, but suddenly he saw the murder news broadcast on television, and he looked like he knew who the murderer was. Ha-Ho Mo immediately went to one of the police officers and offered to help the police to catch the murderer, and he also asked to meet up with Inspector Luke. Still, the police officer did not listen to Ha-Ho Mo's words and instead took Ha-Ho Mo's words as a joke. This upset Ha-Ho Mo, so he ended up beating all the prisoners there to attract the guards' attention so that they would listen to him. After the incident, the prison finally contacted the investigators and called Inspector Luke to come to see Ha-Ho Mo. The officers inside the prison were surprised by Ha-Ho Mo's attitude because Ha-Ho Mo was known as a disciplined and well-behaved prisoner. After successfully meeting with Inspector Luke, Ha-Ho Mo immediately said he knew the killer's real goal. Ha-Ho Mo explained that the killer was a martial arts expert who would slaughter all other martial arts experts to become the number one. Ha-Ho Mo also offered to help the police catch the killer on the condition that he would be released from prison. However, all of Ha-Ho Mo's explanations sounded far-fetched and unreasonable to Inspector Luke and the investigators. Still, Ha-Ho Mo did not remain silent and mentioned 7 names he believed would be the next victims. However, Inspector Luke still did not believe what Ha-Ho Mo said and chose to leave him. The scene then switches to show a man sculpting the swallow sculpture, and he is the murder suspect whose case is currently being handled by Inspector Luke. Ha-Ho Mo's words turned out to be true, as the murderer was meeting a man named Tom King Moo, whose name Ha-Ho Mo had mentioned earlier. King Moo turned out to be one of the best martial arts masters known for his powerful kicks, but he retired 10 years ago and continued his career as an artist. The murderer introduces himself as Fung Yu-Sao and immediately invites King Moo to a duel to the death, so the fight between them immediately ensues. As time passed, their fight became fiercer, but Yu-Sao seemed to be able to dominate the fight. Although King Moo had a strong kick, Yu-Sao defeated King Moo by imitating King Moo's fighting style and managed to kill him. Before leaving, Yu-Sao remembered to leave the iron swallow sculpture that he stuck on King Moo's chest to signify his victory. On the other hand, the police finally got a report about King Moo's death, who was killed by the same person based on the traces left behind, so Inspector Luke felt that what Ha-Ho Mo said was true. That made Inspector Luke go back to see Ha-Ho Mo in prison and tell him that the person Ha-Ho Mo mentioned yesterday was dead. Unexpectedly, Ha-Ho Mo even discovered that King Moo died due to a powerful kick, the same as the police identification. Ha-Ho Mo then explains that the killer, Yu-Sao, can defeat all martial arts experts by fighting them based on their respective abilities. The next day, Ha-Ho Mo was released on parole by the police at Inspector Luke's request to help her and the investigating team solve the serial murder case. Inspector Luke then asked Ha-Ho Mo about the killer's next destination. Ha-Ho Mo also suggested Inspector Luke go to Mongkok because he was sure that the perpetrator would go there to invite a duel of martial arts experts there. Not long after, Ha-Ho Mo's words again came true as the police received another report of a murder that occurred in Mongkok, and the victim was Wang Chit, whose name had also been mentioned by Ha-Ho Mo. When Ha-Ho Mo and Inspector Luke saw Wang Chit's body, Ha-Ho Mo immediately analyzed what had happened to Wang Chit by looking at the wounds on Wang Chit's body. Ha-Ho Mo also imagined that the killer used his opponent's wrestling skills to defeat Wang Chit, a great wrestler. Yu-Sao could even shift some of Wang Chit's bone structure to make him die. When Ha-Ho Mo had just finished analyzing the cause of Wang Chit's death, Ha-Ho Mo accidentally saw the killer, aka Yu-Sao, who was still near the place, so Ha-Ho Mo immediately tried to chase him. Unfortunately, Yu-Sao managed to escape Ha-Ho Mo's pursuit after desperately jumping from the top of a very tall building. After that, Ha-Ho Mo, now free from prison, returned to the village and went to see his wife, Xin Ying, and the two met again after a long time at the market near where they lived. When he got home, Ha-Ho Mo was surprised by a letter and the iron swallow sculpture addressed to himself. Ha-Ho Mo immediately asked Xin Ying about it, and she then explained that a man with a limp about 30 years old had come to their house a few months ago to give it to Ha-Ho Mo. However, because Ha-Ho Mo was imprisoned at the time, the man failed to meet with Ha-Ho Mo, so the man left the object to Xin Ying, and she ended up keeping the object. Elsewhere, Yusaw was silent and remembering his memories about his wife, who turned out to be suffering from an illness, thus making Yusaw become a murderer like now. The next day, Hahomo and his wife went to see a historian to find out about the meaning of the swallow sculpture. He explained that during the Qing dynasty, kung fu experts gathered in Beijing to have a competition, and the loser would get the swallow sculpture from the royal department as a token of honor. The historian asked Hahomo why he was interested in it. Still, Xinying, who already knew the truth, immediately replied that there was a serial killer who always left the swallow sculpture at the scene, and she also explained that the killer had a limp leg. Hearing this, an old man who was a colleague of the historian confessed to Hahomo that 6 years ago, he had been defeated by the same person and that person also left the swallow sculpture for him. The old man also said that the person was named Yusaw, and he also had a disease called atrophy, so the length of his legs became different, making Yusaw walk with a limp. However, Fung Yusaw overcame the disease by practicing martial arts very hard and achieved a great achievement. After getting this important information, Hahomo immediately contacted Inspector Luke and told her all the information. Inspector Luke immediately investigated and managed to find the location of Yusaw's house, so they went straight to Yusaw's place. But when they arrived, they did not find Yusaw's presence because it turned out that Yusaw had long left the place. Not long after, a woman who owned the place told the police that Yusaw was unemployed and only a burden on the family, so he decided to practice kung fu with his wife, who was suffering from cancer. The woman also claimed that one day she saw Yusaw taking a bath using something strange until his body bled, and then Yusaw and his wife decided to move out after paying 6 months arrears to the woman. After that, they continued their search for Yusaw and were about to meet a sword martial arts expert who would be Yusaw's next target. But when they arrived at the place, the martial arts expert seemed fine because it turned out that he had stopped using a sword due to an accident that happened to him 2 years ago. On the other hand, Yusaw, who already knew that, then targeted the student of the sword martial arts expert named Hung Yip, and Yusaw again managed to kill Hung Yip using a small cutter knife and left the swallow sculpture as a sign that he had defeated his opponent. Hahomo and the police again failed to arrest Fung Yusaw, putting Inspector Luke's position as the investigator handling the case in jeopardy, and Hahomo would also be put back in jail. Meanwhile, at the police station, the investigators now got a new clue when everything they found at the scene turned out to have a 100% match with Yusaw. They were even surprised when Yusaw called the police station because he wanted to talk directly with Hahomo. Yusaw then said that Hahomo should always be ready to fight him, and he also threatened to kill Hahomo's wife so that Hahomo could become a killing machine like him. Inspector Luke suspects Hahomo and thinks that maybe Hahomo and Yusaw had a relationship when he was in prison, and thinks that Hahomo is Yusaw's partner. Inspector Luke's suspicions turned out to be correct, and Hahomo had been in contact with Yusaw since a few months ago while still in prison. After getting enough information, the police went straight to a place suspected to be Yusaw's house. But when they arrived, Inspector Luke and the others found no sign of Yusaw's presence there. The police immediately strategized and took positions to ambush Yusaw. The next day, Yusaw is seen coming on a boat to celebrate his wife's birthday. The scene then shows Yusaw's past, who deliberately killed his wife because he didn't want to see his wife, who he loved so much, suffer for life. The scene returns to this time and shows a normal situation. Still, Yusaw can sense the danger that will threaten, and Yusaw was able to recognize the undercover police officers and immediately attack them. One by one, the police officers were killed by Yusaw without any mercy. On the other hand, it turned out that the investigator in Yusaw's place was sent a recording from prison about Hahomo, who had met Yusaw when he was in prison. Inspector Luke and the police decided to arrest Hahomo and assumed that Hahomo and Yusaw were working together so that Hahomo could get out of prison. Now Hahomo and his wife also became the pursuit target of the police, but it turned out that Xinying had already left to fight Yusaw so that her husband would not fight with him. But Hahomo realized that, and he immediately went berserk and went looking for his wife, so that Hahomo was forced to fight against the police. On the other hand, Xinying threatened Yusaw by saying that she would destroy the ashes of Yusaw's wife's corpse if Yusaw still fought with Hahomo. However, Yusaw did not care and intended to kill Xinying, so they immediately got into a fight. Although Xinying's fighting skills were excellent, she was no match for Yusaw, who finally defeated Xinying by sticking a sword in her arm. Not long after, Hahomo came to the fight scene and was shocked when he saw Xinying's dying condition while Yusaw managed to escape. Hahomo then called the police to save his wife, who was dying, while Hahomo himself was going to go after Yusaw. On the other hand, Yusaw was again able to escape the pursuit of Inspector Luke and the police by ramming his boat into the police's boat, so Inspector Luke was declared a failure in capturing the serial killer. Shortly after, Hahomo called Inspector Luke, admitting that he and Yusaw had met. Still, Yusaw's reason for meeting him was to invite him to fight to the death and determine who would become the #1 martial arts expert in the world, and if Hahomo refused, then Yusaw would kill his wife. In this incident, Inspector Luke finally had to be deported because she was considered negligent in carrying out her duties and was replaced by a new investigator. In contrast, Ha-Ho-Mo decided to kill Yusao. On the other hand, Inspector Luke did not give up and immediately went to meet Ha-Ho-Mo because she was very sure that Ha-Ho-Mo would fight with Yusao. The scene then changes and shows Yusao suddenly stopping a truck in the middle of the road, and it turns out that the one driving the truck is Ha-Ho-Mo. The two immediately engage in a very fierce battle. Although they look equally strong, Ha-Ho-Mo looks more dominant and can even overwhelm Yusao. They both launched various strong attacks, but even though they both competed to kill each other, there was no cheating or dirty tricks done. In the end, Yusao gave up and admitted his defeat to Ha-Ho-Mo, the #1 kung fu master in Asia. Yusao even asked Ha-Ho-Mo to kill him, but Yusao's words made Ha-Ho-Mo begin to realize and become reluctant to fight, and it made Yusao very disappointed in Ha-Ho-Mo. Yusao attacked Ha-Ho-Mo again until a moment in the middle of the road made Ha-Ho-Mo dragged by a truck, and his back was badly injured, and he fainted. When Ha-Ho-Mo woke up, he saw Yusao dead next to him, and Inspector Luke shot Yusao to death. The movie concludes by showing 3 months after the incident. Ha-Ho-Mo appears in great condition and has been doing his usual activities in prison. Not long after, Inspector Luke called him, and Ha-Ho-Mo was found not guilty, so he was released unconditionally. After that, Ha-Ho-Mo returned home, and over time Ha-Ho-Mo managed to establish a kung fu school with many students. The moral message that we can learn from this movie is that greed will not produce anything.